Pope Francis delivered Easter Sunday Mass in a near-empty St. Peter's Basilica as churches grapple with celebrating one of the holiest days of the year in a time when physical distancing is a matter of life and death. The pontiff says the pandemic is testing our whole human family and that this is not a time for self-centeredness and division. Only a handful of people were inside the basilica to assist with a virtual service for worshippers to watch from home. It's in stark comparison to last year, when some 70,000 people filled St. Peter's Square for the service. Italy is one of the worst hit countries in the COVID-19 pandemic, and the religious community has not been spared from the devastation. According to the New York Times, at least 100 priests in Italy have died since the outbreak hit that country.
When we come out of this, and we will come out of this, we will all take pride in the sacrifices we've made to protect each other and to protect the country we love.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau thanked Canadians for doing their part to prevent the spread of COVID-19 by keeping up their physical distance this Easter. He also offered words of support for the healthcare workers on the front lines of the pandemic during a holiday weekend for so many cultures, including Passover, Tamil New Year, and the Sikh holiday Vaisakhi. Easter Sunday services across Canada took on a much different look this year, with religious leaders addressing congregations via live streams. It's a way of navigating the difficult balance of keeping tradition and practicing physical distancing, so necessary to protect our communities from COVID-19. Global's Joe Scarpelli shows us how churches are adapting in these trying times.
You'd never guess it was Easter Sunday, judging by the parking lot of this Winnipeg church.
Better is the thing that we can look at.
But there is a service happening inside.
I don't think anybody's seen an Easter like this before. But I think the church has learned to adapt and has adapted very well.
For the first time, Pastor Jerry Michalski is live streaming his Easter service to an empty building. Families around the city tuning in from home.
Kev's drinking his coffee. We're watching church on the big screen there.
Similar celebrations taking place around the country. A church in Saskatoon with its first ever virtual Easter choir. It took 70 hours to stitch together 40 videos of the people singing their parts. And this Toronto family is adapting their festivities to suit the times. A virtual Easter this year for an 82-year-old grandmother who hasn't missed an Easter Sunday Mass in her life.
I feel sad because I don't see nobody at the church.
We had our cousins kind of come through the back and just stand outside the door and just gave our Easter wishes to each other. And that was obviously different and hard.
Welcome to our venue.
In Calgary, one church going drive-in movie style for its service. Cars packing the parking lot, tuning into the radios, and watching the pastor on the big screen.
It would be a record attendance for us, like for sure on any day. Probably times 1.5 or 2. So yeah, it's been busy for us.
A different but unforgettable Easter. Joe Scarpelli, Global News, Winnipeg.